There are many hotly debated topics in politics today, but perhaps one of the most debated and one that arises most passions in individuals is the issue of immigration. Across the world, in communities that are impoverished, that are struggling to survive, are having to migrate out of their homes in order to find a better life for themselves and for their children. This is the case in our own country. As families are displaced from their own homes, they have to risk life and death in order to come seeking a better life. Unfortunately, we ourselves are having a tough time in our economy, and when our nation suffers, we become fearful of those that are coming seeking a better way of living. One of the things that occurs with immigration is, and one of the most serious victims of immigration is often the children. Children who, without making a decision on their own, are brought here by their parents at a very early age, toddlers, 5-year-olds. These children, when they have to go to school, are often having difficulties finding a way of life and finding their way in the educational system. And many times children fail, drop out, way before they're supposed to. You realize that in the United States, almost 50% of our young immigrant population is not finishing high school. And the trend is only supposed to increase in the next coming decades. Latinos and immigrants also represent disproportionate numbers in the jails and correctional systems. It is estimated that more than 3 times the general population of Latino youth exist in correctional facilities today than they do in the population at large. One of the things that we need to do is become involved in the future of our nation. And what better way to become involved in the future than to invest in our children? Our children require a basic education. They require basic health care. And we do not and should not distinguish between those children that were born here and those children that were born somewhere else. The process of immigrating to a new culture is often very traumatic. And it's very traumatic for children of all ages, particularly for children that are accustomed to going to school, to have families, to have developed a culture in one country and then be uprooted and start all over again in another country. Many children today that are being misdiagnosed or treated as if they have learning disabilities simply because they cannot speak our language. Soon as children drop out of schools, we begin to see inevitable involvement in things like gangs and crime and violence, teenage pregnancy, and so many other of the ills that are plaguing our youth today. The idea of leaving home, of being uprooted, of having to start all over again is traumatic for all of us. Imagine our children who all of a sudden are told or have to find out from, or are told that they are worthless, or that they are illegal, that they are criminals. Many children grow up with this label and begin to feel unwanted and unprotected. One of the most basic needs that we have as humans is the need to be loved and the need to belong. That need is more prominent in young children. As young immigrant children find it difficult to belong, find it difficult to be accepted in their social environment, oftentimes they will go out of their way and they will do things they would normally not do to be accepted by their peers. Oftentimes, kids that are involved in difficult social issues such as violence and gang activity, these children oftentimes are engaged in behaviors that seem attractive or cool, and they attract the attention of young children who want to be accepted, who want to be approved. And oftentimes children who are attracted become components and become involved in gang activities and violence, and thus ruin their future and ruin their lives. Our families are oftentimes unable to understand what happens with gangs. They are unable to understand the culture of gangs. And so our immigrant parents are oftentimes not able to take care of their children. And what we find is our children are rejecting the old ways, rejecting the culture, but they're also not finding themselves accepted by the new culture. It's in this world of acceptance and rejection that our children are having to find a home and a sense of belonging with peers and friends that are not always the best choice. When children become involved in gangs and crime, we all pay the price. As our economy gets more difficult and as our nation is struggling economically, children are having to oftentimes support their families, even if the means of supporting their families is oftentimes ill-gotten. We have to be part of the solution. We have to recognize that by helping immigrant children, by trying to dissuade young men and women from gangs and crime and drugs and all of the issues that are facing them, by giving them a sense of hope, a sense of belonging, by teaching them that they are loved, we can change their future, we can impact their lives, and we can improve our own future. Families are wanting to be involved, they're wanting to help, but oftentimes when the culture seems so different, when everything seems so foreign, when families are scared of deportation or scared of becoming involved, they don't participate as much as they should or as much as they could. The way to bridge this gap between the old generation and the new generation, between the immigrant generation and the generous generation of Americans here, the way to bridge these gaps is to have dialogue, to have discussion, and to recognize that what impacts the immigrant community will also impact our own well-being. We often think of third world countries as existing in other places, of extreme poverty only existing in places like Africa or the Philippines or some foreign exotic place that is far from our reality. The truth of the matter is that here, in our own country, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, young children are often going without medical care and are going hungry on a daily basis. These children often don't have access to services. There are a disproportionate number of children are going without basic vaccinations, without basic physical examinations. Our children are going to school hungry and staying hungry, and they're not able to learn on an empty stomach. The reality of poverty, of severe poverty, is occurring all around us, and it occurs here in our own front yards. So what can we do to help? Well, we can help in many different ways. We can help by providing economic support to programs like the one here at the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart. Or we need mentors. You could volunteer to become a mentor to a young person who needs help and support. You could become a tutor. We need tutors to help students get their ESL and GED degrees. But most of all, our families and our youth need a friend. They need somebody who is going to care for them, somebody who would be willing to donate a little bit of their time to give them just a little bit of kindness and love.